Listen up, because the time for silence is over. Imagine the glare of camera lights cutting through the humidity of Ouagadougou's midday sky, a hush settling over a packed press gallery. A few days ago, word spread like wildfire that Israel's prime minister had warned Africa's leaders to stay in line or face the consequences. Whether that message truly came from Benjamin Netanyahu isn't the point. It was the spark that ignited a continent-wide fire. Ibrahim Traoré stood before the microphones with no script in hand, his jaw set and eyes blazing. He didn't tiptoe around polite diplomatic language. He spoke plain truth. Burkina Faso does not answer to Tel Aviv. We don't answer to Washington. We answer only to our people. You could hear the weight of every syllable settle into the silence. In that moment, one question burned in every heart. Will we continue to bow down, or will we stand up for our freedom? For generations, foreign powers have treated Africa like a chessboard moving pieces, carving out resources and expecting compliance. But now the chessboard is flipping back. Across the Sahel, from Mali to Niger, from Guinea to South Africa, ordinary farmer students and elders are sharing that video clip on every social platform. They're finding in Traoré's words the reflection of their own hopes and frustrations. So here's the question for you. In this pivotal moment of Africa news, will you stand by as a silent observer, or will you join millions who refuse to be pawns? If you believe that a free and united Africa is worth standing up for, please share this message with friends and family. And if you want to see more honest, emotion-driven updates from the heart of Burkina Faso and beyond, hit subscribe now, because this story is just beginning. Ibrahim Traoré stepped onto the raised platform in Ouagadougou's central square with nothing but the hard-packed earth beneath his feet and a sea of expectant faces before him. The midday sun bore down through a hazy sky, but every eye was fixed on the man who had come to speak truth to power. Just days earlier, an alarming report began circulating across Africa that Israel's prime minister had privately warned African heads of state to stay in line or face the consequences. Whether Benjamin Netanyahu ever uttered those words was beside the point. The rumor alone was enough to reignite centuries of frustration over foreign meddling and condescension. As the cameras rolled and journalists poised their microphones, Traoré did something nearly unheard of in diplomatic circles. He abandoned the script. No carefully measured phrases, no bureaucratic hedging. Instead, he fixed his gaze on the nearest lens and spoke with the solemn intensity of a man who had carried the weight of history on his shoulders. My name is Ibrahim Traoré, president of Burkina Faso. He began, voice steady but searing. I'm here because we are done staying silent. Those 8 words, simple, declarative, cracked through the charged stillness of the moment. He continued, we are done bowing down. We are done letting foreign powers treat our continent like their playground. Then came the core of his rebuke, directed not only at Israel, but at any external actor who still believed Africa could be coerced or cajoled into submission. Burkina Faso does not answer to Tel Aviv. We don't answer to Washington. We answer only to the people who sent us here. The room went quiet. Even the wind seemed to pause. For a heartbeat, you could hear a pin drop. In that instant, Traoré was speaking for millions of Africans who had watched their natural resources, gold, diamonds, oil, flow out of their lands, while foreign governments drew lines on maps and dictated policies behind closed doors. Behind him, the flag of Burkina Faso flapped gently in the breeze, a vivid splash of red and green against a pale sky. Traoré leaned forward as if to underscore the seriousness of his vow. If any foreign leader thinks they can threaten us, they are gravely mistaken. His words carried the weight of personal conviction. There was no threat of retaliation, no boast of military might, only a firm pledge to defend the nation's dignity. The impact was immediate. Field reports from Ouagadougou described an eruption of emotion, women in brightly colored headscarves pressing against the stage barrier, hands raised in solidarity. Young men chanting Traoré's name. Elders whose lined faces seemed to smooth out with hope. Throughout the crowd, strangers embraced and wept as though they had been waiting their entire lives for someone to give voice to their collective courage. As Traoré concluded his address, reminding listeners that Africa is not your colony, and we will fight for our freedom with everything we've got. He stepped back and allowed the moment to linger. Cameras continued filming the aftermath, the stunned expressions of foreign correspondents, the energy crackling among citizens who suddenly felt empowered. No formal diplomatic communique, no behind-closed-doors memorandum could match the raw authenticity of that unfiltered speech. In the hours that followed, every social media feed across the continent caught fire. Clips of those opening lines. "We are done staying silent" were shared by activists in Mali, by farmers in Niger, by students in South Africa. Messages poured in from neighboring capitals. "You spoke for us. Our time has come. Long live Burkina Faso." Within 24 hours, the phrase "we answer only to our people" had become a rallying cry, retweeted and reposted thousands of times. Even seasoned journalists admitted they had never witnessed such instantaneous solidarity born from a single speech. That night, as the square emptied and the journalists filed back into their hotels, the echo of Traoré's words still hovered in the humid air. In living rooms across rural villages and crowded urban apartments, families replayed the clip again and again on battery-powered radios and smartphones. The speech became more than a political statement. It was a reminder that when one voice stands unflinchingly for truth, it can awaken the spirits of an entire continent. The moment reached its peak when President Traoré, sensing the crowd's swelling energy, raised both arms in a deliberate, almost ceremonial gesture. The midday sun seemed to pause as he intoned, "If you come for one of us, you come for all of us." In that electrifying instant, the collective heartbeat of Ouagadougou thrummed like a single mighty drum. Journalists scrambled to capture the raw tableau, children perched on their parents' shoulders, eyes wide. Market vendors clutching baskets frozen in mid-step. Local musicians tapping out impromptu rhythms on discarded cans. It was the kind of crescendo that turns a speech into a shared visceral experience and cements a leader's words into history. In the immediate aftermath, the atmosphere crackled with emotion. Government aides exchanged relieved smiles while security personnel allowed themselves brief, triumphant nods. Elders draped in traditional Faso cloth wiped tears from their cheeks, whispering prayers of thanks that their dignity had finally been voiced. Even the city's stray dogs, notorious for ignoring human affairs, stirred and tracked the departing crowd, as though unwilling to let go of the moment's gravity. For many in that square, it was the first time they felt their voices truly mattered on the world stage. As night fell, that same sense of unity radiated across digital networks. Within hours, a 6-minute clip of Traoré's climax, his arms outstretched, voice ringing, was being shared by millions under the hashtag #Africa will not bow. Students in Bamako debated its implications over steaming cups of tea. Shopkeepers in Niamey replayed it on battery-powered radios. Dock workers in Sierra Leone leaned over smartphones to watch the pivotal lines. The clip transcended borders, uniting listeners from disparate backgrounds in a single potent emotion resolve. International reaction began to trickle in. In Tel Aviv, official spokespeople remained conspicuously silent, a strategic non-response that spoke volumes about the speech's impact. In Washington, a senior State Department official offered a measured statement. "We respect Burkina Faso's sovereignty and look forward to continued partnership," a diplomatic nod that carefully avoided any mention of Netanyahu's alleged remarks or of criticism leveled at the United States. Meanwhile, leading Western outlets gave the story scant coverage, preferring headlines about economic indicators or regional elections. Their reticence only fueled frustration among African audiences who felt their continent's voice was still being sidelined in global discourse. Elsewhere, reactions varied but carried the same chord of support. Mali's transitional leader, Colonel Assimi Goïta, reposted the video on social media, writing, "Our brothers in Burkina Faso have spoken for us all." In Niamey, President Mohamed Bazoum issued a brief communiqué endorsing the right of all African nations to self-determination. Guinea's activist community organized solidarity rallies in Conakry, waving homemade banners quoting Traoré's challenge, "We are not your playground." Even across the Atlantic, members of the African diaspora in Paris and New York staged impromptu gatherings, chanting excerpts of the speech and posting solidarity live streams tagged "Now Sahel Solidarity." Importantly, the emotional peak of Traoré's address sparked conversations beyond mere rhetoric. Think tanks in Dakar began hosting virtual panels to dissect what a continental defense pact might entail. University professors in Johannesburg seized the moment to introduce courses on post-colonial sovereignty. And ordinary citizens felt emboldened to question long-standing power dynamics in their own communities, whether that meant demanding clearer accountability from local officials or refusing exploitative labor contracts offered by foreign corporations. Yet not all responses were celebratory. Critics in Burkina Faso's political opposition warned of overreach, cautioning that a confrontational posture could isolate the country diplomatically or invite economic reprisals. A small but vocal contingent on social media argued that the speech, while stirring, risked exacerbating regional tensions in an already unstable Sahel. However, these dissenting voices were largely drowned out by the wave of optimism and unity sweeping the continent. By the third day, the steel-edged defiance that Traoré had summoned echoed in every major capital from Dakar to Dar es Salaam. Radio hosts dissected his every nuance. Village elders recited favorite lines from memory. Youth groups drafted petitions calling for expanded regional cooperation. In markets and mosques, cafes and classrooms, people asked one another not if, but when the rest of Africa would fully embrace this moment of awakening. Through it all, the emotional climax of that speech and the ensuing flood of reactions revealed a continent in the midst of transformation. Ibrahim Traoré's words did more than challenge a distant leader. They galvanized a cross-continental movement, demanding respect, solidarity, and self-determination. As the echoes of "We are done staying silent" continued to reverberate, it became clear that this was not simply a diplomatic gust, but the opening gusts of a long-awaited storm of change. When news of President Traoré's defiant address reached the streets of Ouagadougou the next morning, local civil society groups wasted no time turning words into action. Neighborhood committees convened in open squares and community halls, mapping out peaceful demonstrations and town hall meetings. In one district, a group of market women, many plucking scarves from their heads in solidarity, penned a petition demanding greater transparency in how foreign contracts for mining and drilling were awarded. Their resolve was born of long-standing frustration. For years, foreign companies profited while local farmers struggled. Now they felt empowered to challenge the status quo. Across the political spectrum, Traoré's stance reshaped debates in the National Assembly. Opposition leaders who had once criticized his economic reforms as too cautious found themselves scrambling to show support for his bold rhetoric. In a surprise session called by the Speaker, lawmakers amended a bill to require all future oil and gas agreements to be ratified by a citizens' council. During the vote, an opposition member stood and declared, "If our leader will not be silent, neither shall we." The chamber erupted in applause, a rare moment of national unity that underscored how the speech recalibrated Burkina Faso's political balance. On the streets of Bobo-Dioulasso, local youth organizations seized the moment to register thousands of first-time voters ahead of upcoming municipal elections. Under mango trees, volunteers explained the link between sovereign choices and everyday services: new schools, better roads, clean water. Each young person who signed up felt more than a civic duty. They felt part of a movement insisting that the government work for the people, not foreign interests. For many, registering to vote became an act of defiance, proof that their voices would count. Meanwhile, regional governments took notice. Mali's Minister of Planning announced talks to harmonize civil aviation regulations across the Sahel Alliance, aiming to reduce dependency on European carriers. In Niger, the president ordered a review of all existing defense agreements with former colonial powers, pledging that any foreign troop deployments must now be approved by a parliamentary oversight committee. These political shifts reflected a broader willingness to challenge inherited systems, even at the risk of diplomatic friction. In the countryside, villagers once wary of politics found new purpose. In a small farming community near Kaya, elders organized literacy classes to help residents understand legal texts and international treaties. "We cannot fight for our land if we cannot read the agreements," said a local teacher, her voice trembling with pride. The air crackled with possibility, ordinary citizens learning the tools to hold leaders and foreign entities accountable. However, the rapid surge of civic activism also exposed fault lines. In some towns, rival youth groups clashed over who would lead community forums, and local officials struggled to manage competing ambitions. One city council member warned that a power vacuum might emerge if too many groups pressed demands at once. Yet even this tension spoke to a newfound public energy. It was far preferable, he argued, to apathy than public debate. Politically, Western embassies in Ouagadougou adjusted their strategies. Analysts reported increased outreach to civil society organizations rather than to government ministries alone. One diplomat speaking on background admitted the shift: "We underestimated how deeply people felt about sovereignty. Now we must engage communities, not just officials." This realignment hinted at long-term consequences, a more pluralistic channel of influence that respected however grudgingly popular sentiment. At the national level, civil-military relations also evolved. Burkina Faso's armed forces, long wary of overt political commentary, issued a statement affirming their commitment to protect the people's will. In doing so, they implicitly recognized the speech's resonance among troops, many of whom hailed from the same rural towns now buzzing with civic meetings. For the first time in years, uniformed officers marched alongside civilians in official parades, celebrating national unity, their banners quoting Traoré's rallying cry, "We answer only to our people." By week's end, the civil and political landscape of Burkina Faso had shifted visibly. Citizens, farmers, teachers, market vendors, youth stepped forward with new confidence. Legislators rewrote rules, regional partners renegotiated pacts, embassies broadened engagement, the military publicly aligned with popular will. All these changes sprung from a single speech that dared to challenge foreign interference. In the process, Burkina Faso illuminated a path for other African nations wrestling with their own histories of external control. The repercussions were not just policy shifts, but a revival of public agency, a testament to the power of words spoken from the heart. Across the Atlantic, Washington's reaction was cautious yet telling. A spokesperson for the U.S. State Department issued a statement emphasizing respect for Burkina Faso's sovereignty and commitment to strengthening partnership in security and development. That carefully neutral tone signaled both support for Traoré's anti-interference message and wariness about public criticism of Israel or the United States. In Congress, members of the Africa-focused caucus praised the speech's call for self-reliance, while others urged a balanced approach, warning that alienating key allies could jeopardize ongoing counterterrorism collaborations in the Sahel. American think tanks seized on the moment. Analysts at the Brookings Institution published a rapid response brief highlighting how Traoré's rhetoric reshapes diplomatic norms and suggested that U.S. policy should pivot toward deeper engagement with civil society rather than relying solely on government-to-government channels. Meanwhile, experts at the Council on Foreign Relations debated on national television whether this new wave of African assertiveness offers opportunity for U.S. soft power or risk of strategic drift. The African diaspora in the United States amplified the conversation. Community organizations in Minneapolis and New York hosted live-streamed viewing parties of Traoré's speech, followed by panel discussions featuring local activists and scholars. They praised his message as a rare example of authentic leadership, arguing that it resonates with diaspora members who have long felt their voices sidelined in both American and African political spheres. Globally, reactions were equally diverse. In Brussels, an EU foreign affairs official welcomed Traoré's emphasis on regional cooperation, noting that the Sahel Alliance could complement EU-led stabilization efforts so long as it upheld democratic norms. In Beijing, state media framed the speech as vindication of China's non-interference policy, contrasting it with Western meddling. Russian commentators, for their part, cited the event as evidence of declining Western influence in Africa. At the United Nations, several African ambassadors referenced Traoré's words during a special debate on decolonization, urging member states to heal historical wounds and honor the principle of equal partnership. Yet some Western delegates expressed concern that the speech's confrontational tone might derail collaborative projects in peacekeeping and development. Overall, Ibrahim Traoré's bold address recalibrated international perceptions, a reminder that Africa news is no longer confined to aid flows and security briefings, but driven by leaders who speak directly to global powers. From the halls of the U.S. Capitol to the corridors of the UN, his message of sovereignty and solidarity has become a reference point for policymakers, scholars, and activists alike, signaling that Burkina Faso's voice now carries weight in conversations about Africa's future. As this moment of awakening sweeps across the continent, one warning stands: crystal clear silence is the true danger. When foreign powers whisper threats or dangle empty promises, the cost is paid by ordinary families, by mothers who worry for their children's future, by farmers whose lands are leased without their consent, by communities whose voices go unheard. If we fail to act now, we risk surrendering our hard-won dignity and the promise of a self-determined tomorrow. But this is more than a call to resist, it is an invitation to build. Picture village councils in the Sahel crafting new schools that teach their own histories. Imagine young voters in Burkina Faso united around fair elections, insisting their leaders answer to them, not to distant capitals. Envision the Sahel Alliance growing into a partnership of empowered nations, pooling resources for hospitals that save lives rather than fill foreign coffers. This is the future Traore dared to describe, one where Africa stands not as a pawn, but as an equal partner on the world stage. Now it's your turn. Will you carry this message beyond the borders of Ouagadougou? Will you help transform outrage into action? Share this video with friends and family. Spark conversations in your own community about what sovereignty truly means. Let us hear your voice. What steps will you take to ensure that Africa's destiny is written by its people? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. If you believe that authentic leadership and grassroots solidarity can reshape our shared world, subscribe today. By joining this channel, you'll receive honest, emotion-driven updates straight from the heart of Burkina Faso and beyond. Together, we can amplify the voices that matter, keep our leaders accountable, and stand united for a free, proud, and prosperous continent. Please share if you feel you're among the first to support President Ibrahim Traoré in his bold stand, and subscribe if you believe that the truth of Africa news is more important than any headline. The story is unfolding, and your voice can help write its next chapter.